Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Battery Dance TV. I'm Jonathan Hollander, the founder and artistic director of Battery Dance. And since March 27th, 2020, Battery Dance TV has brought weekly and now bi-weekly dance diplomacy with Jonathan interviews, where we've gone around the world to talk to dance makers, to diplomats, to people involved in the arts in various different ways to find out how they're doing during the pandemic and to dig a little bit deeply into their artistic process. And I'm so delighted that today's interview has brought me back in touch with an old friend, a colleague, someone with whom I danced in my very first years in New York City, Liss Fain. Liss, welcome to Battery Dance TV.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So, Liss Fain is the director of Liss Fain Dance in San Francisco. And it looks like you're in a beautiful setting. I try to make a beautiful setting as far as Lower Manhattan permits in the winter, but there you are in the lush greenery. And you know, it's funny because I think of you as somebody who has taken inspiration from nature in your work. And so how fitting that we should see you in this kind of setting. So tell us, you know, if you can look back on the past months of the pandemic, how did you react? What happened with Liss Fain Dance? Were you in the middle of projects? Were you able to start new things? What has this period meant for you?
Well, for me, it's actually been, in the beginning anyway, a wonderful period of introspection and development, because the company and I had created and presented 14 performance installation works in a decade, and they were evening length pieces. And by the last of those, I felt I really needed to take some time to think about where I needed to go next.
Mhm.
So that's what I was doing.
So it was like a gift in a way,
Yeah, and so the
the
pandemic,
peace and quiet and lack of pressure.
right, and suddenly I was stuck at home and I couldn't go anywhere. And um, and you know, fortunately, also my daughter and her boyfriend ended up living here, so I wasn't alone,
Mhm.
which was made it much easier. And I was just fooling around on my own, working on things, making notes. And I got some information about an artist in residency in the Bay Area, which I thought, oh, I could apply for. It doesn't require living somewhere else.
Mhm.
And I ended up applying for it, thinking I would never get it because I don't do dance about social justice issues, and those were at the forefront.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I thought, well, I'm just going to do it. I would love to have this happen. And then one day in the afternoon, I was hiking behind my house, which happens to be at the foot of a mountain. And I was hiking on the mountain on the ridge, and the fog was rolling in. And I looked at it and thought, I have got to go to Pierce Point Ranch at dawn in the fog. And that's an area very remote at the end of this National Seashore Point Reyes. It takes about an hour and a half to get there. And it's a beautiful setting. It's an old farm that's still standing, although not being used. And I had never been there before dawn in my life. But I got up
It's
and
like a pilgrimage.
yeah, I left at 4 a.m. in the dark, and I drove out there down this long, windy road, and it was enmeshed in fog. It was absolutely beautiful. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to do a film here in the fog, because there is some energy to this place, particularly at that time of day, that
Mhm.
that I want to capture. It's sort of about boundaries, like what are your boundaries? How do you keep moving forwards? It was about ongoingness. And this uh, place, Pierce Point Ranch, is located on a bluff And on one side is the Pacific Ocean, and on the other side is a bay. Let me read you a few sentences about the ranch.
Please do.
What a glorious view high up between the ocean and the bay. In the dawn fog, the old, well-built structures feel at one with the natural environment. The buildings, even the paint, have lasted. The sense of solidity and life of the thriving ranch of the 18 and 1900s remains. Who were the people who loved this place, who chose to live so far out on the peninsula?
Thank you for reading those, because it puts us in to the place that has entranced you. And now we all want to see what you're going to do with that. We want to know who those people are, who those dancers of Liss Fain dance impersonate or become or interact with that beautiful setting. Are you going to take us back to this grant that you applied for?
Well, yes. So the next
Okay.
day, I opened my email and I had been accepted to be the artist in residence.
That was the same day?
The next day,
The next day, okay.
I opened my email. So I thought, oh my God, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
So that's what I ended up spending this entire period working on. Like, what is this going to be? How can I develop it? I've never made a dance film. I'm working with a woman who's does both videography and dance filmmaking.
What's her name?
Her name is Lindsay Gauthier, and she's an excellent, has a wonderful eye, has a terrific eye. So it was just a wonderful confluence of events that
It was
occurred.
meant to be, obviously. I mean, when you were talking about going to that amazing ranch in the fog, leaving at 4 a.m, it reminds me of, you know, pilgrims going up to special temples in India where they leave and, you know, so that they can see the sun come up on the temple, you know, and blessing and gracing the space. It sounds like a very similar kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels, it has, there's an energy that's just, you, you can't even put it into words. And I wanted to understand what that energy is and how to make it be evident within a dance film.
So
So,
did you bring in other people? I mean, was this really a solo experiment with yourself and the filmmaker, or did it involve other dancers?
okay, so I decided to work. There's a core group of 4 dancers who have been with me for quite a while now. And because of the pandemic, particularly, I only wanted to work with those 4 people.
Mhm.
So we began working just on Zoom. And I started working with them on movement. And typically, what I do is create movement or bring in prompts. We talk about ideas. They take the movement, they work on it in various ways. So we started with Zoom, and that got a little frustrating in certain ways.
Mhm.
And because there's a limit to what you can do in your living space.
Right.
Uh, so then we started working outdoors in a park in the mornings, and it was, you know, deserted. We had all the space we needed, which was great. It was We were planning on going as a group out to this area, but it's a, you know, it's an all day excursion because it's a couple of hours out there and a couple of hours
And
back.
what month are we talking about? Because I'm aware that fires and smoke, you know, enveloped a lot of San Francisco area.
Well, we couldn't go out there. Yeah, at first we couldn't. There was a month in which, you know, the area was completely covered in smoke. Everybody had their air purifiers running, and that was our Zoom time. We didn't go out. Nobody went
I
outside.
see. Okay. Okay.
And so it wasn't until probably the middle of September, I think,
Mhm.
when we could actually start to go outside, or later in September. So we started going to the park later in September, and then we decided we would go out to Pierce Point Ranch right after Thanksgiving. And
Mhm.
right after Thanksgiving was when the spike occurred here in the coronavirus, and everything went into complete lockdown.
Mhm.
And the dancers and the filmmaker, everybody felt, you know what, we really can't do this. We can't, we have to wait.
Right.
So it just got put on pause because of that. And
Are
in a
you
way,
still on pause now? Because I know California is been suffering so much.
yeah, we're still on pause
Yeah.
because it's still on lockdown and nothing's been opened
Look at
up.
how many months this has been that you're waiting.
It's been really frustrating. So at first, it was actually okay because I felt like I could use this time to really reflect on what we had,
Mhm.
how it could evolve, where it needs to go. The plan was that we were going to go out to Pierce Point Ranch, have some intensive days there, put the movement that would worked on site, where we think it could go, how we think it could go, and then we could go back to working in a park and work on what we'd learned at Pierce Point Ranch. And then we were supposed to be filming in 10 days uh, out there, but that all got pushed. So now, we haven't set ourselves a time frame because we just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing is creating a folder that I'm sharing with the filmmaker of ideas, of writings. I wrote something that's going to be spoken by an actor at the beginning of this. Because one thing I've felt in watching a number of dance films is when there's spoken word, somehow it helps anchor a film that isn't necessarily narrative in something that's human.
I
Uh,
you have to think about the audience, for a dance film, because films are going to go much broader and wider than your live performances ever could. So then I think you have to think about whether you have an educated audience, an audience that's been following your work, or hopefully a much more expanded audience.
yeah, hopefully, I mean, that's the advantage of a film. I mean, you can expand beyond your local fan base and you
Hmm.
can reach people all over. Um, that's so we're that's so right now I'm in this pause mode and it's giving me an opportunity to really think about this more completely. Like, since a film is not that long and you
What
have
is
to,
the length that you're projecting?
well, the filmmaker says 5 to 10 minutes for a dance film is really appropriate. And from all the dance films I've watched, and I've watched hours of films specifically for dance, not just videos of dance performances.
Right, right.
I agree with her.
Filmed for, I mean, video dances.
Yeah, yeah. Films that are specifically made as a dance film and
Right,
not as
right,
a performance.
right,
And not inside a theater where you have the luxury of theater lighting and all the other accoutrements of a theater.
right.
So it's wherever else it could be made. And it's been a really interesting education watching as much as I have. It's been wonderful to see films from all around the world.
Mhm.
And what's wonderful is that the most successful films utilize the environment as an essential part of the concept of the film. The environment is not just a random pretty place. It makes sense for what the film is trying to communicate.
And when you've been doing your previous work, live work that was installation work, you were also thinking the same way. In other words, the dance that you created was made for a specific environment. Now this, you're blowing out the walls now and going into nature. But I think you've had a lot of preparation for working collaboratively with designers. In this case, it'll be the filmmaker.
Yeah, and it feels almost natural. I mean, it's ironic in a way because after the last of the installation pieces, which we performed, I felt, I need to push myself in a different direction. And I'm not quite sure what it is, but I just need to find a different way to present work. And that's what I was trying to grapple with when the whole pandemic unfolded.
Yeah.
And so doing a dance film and moving my installation work from an indoor installation, which we build and we conceive, to an outdoor extant place is really exciting. I mean, it's really interesting and it feels like, yeah, this is what I needed.
Well, we're going to have to come back after this interview. You know, when California rate of infection goes down, the lockdown is over, and you can actually go out to that beautiful place and film, we need to be able to share that with our audience. So maybe this is something that can come into our 40th anniversary of the Battery Dance Festival, where we don't know whether we're going to be live or a hybrid form in August of this year. So I hope that you'll consider our festival as a possible venue for the film once it's made.
Oh, that would be great. I would love that. That would be terrific.
You actually performed in the Battery Dance Festival when it was called the Downtown Dance Festival many, many years ago. Would it have been in the 1980s? I'm guessing I didn't do my research beforehand. You were in California by that time. When did you move to California?
I moved to California. I was still in Boston because I moved to California in 1989, and
Okay,
we didn't really settle here until late 1989.
okay, okay.
So it was when I was
Oh,
in
you were
Boston.
still in Boston? Okay. So, you know, I wanted to share with our audience the fact that I have known you all these years, and that when you're describing being in your studio alone and experimenting with movement, I'm picturing you in South Point Channel, or what is it called in Boston?
Oh, Fort Point.
Ford Point Channel, where you had a loft. And I just can picture in my mind's eye you're dancing around that space, beautiful wooden space, in what was then a kind of remote area of Boston. I think then became very fashionable after you established it, like many situations like Soho and Tribeca, where artists were the pioneers, and then everybody else discovered, wow, this is a great place to live, priced out for artists. So but I can picture you back in Boston in your early years of choreography, and look at, you know, how many years has it been that you've been working on your own creation as a choreographer? Have
Oh my
you
goodness.
done the math? Have you figured that out?
I think I'd rather not do the math. Probably um, over 40 years for sure. Over
Yeah,
40.
definitely. At least 45 years.
Yeah, I mean, I started out just doing small, simple things. And then I started when I was in Boston. Somehow I started working with people at MIT's Media Center, and they were
Oh,
doing experiments with video and dance.
so now you're coming back full circle.
I know it's kind of funny, isn't it? And we were doing these really interesting experiments with people in different parts of a building, a large building at MIT, and dancers seeing the other group of dancers on a monitor and responding to that with their dancing live to the monitor. So there were these two groups of dancers who were communicating via the images of each other on a monitor. It
I'm
was,
just shaking my head because these are things that are considered totally avant-garde and of the moment right now. And
yeah,
you were doing them in the 1980s in Boston. So, you know, it nothing is really new, but everything is new, because when an artist's hands touch a work of art, it becomes new and it becomes a new inspiration. And you're a great example of that. It's been just wonderful touching base with you, Liss. I definitely want to see that film. I think our audience is going to be hungry for it. We can't even put little preview shots up here because you weren't able to to even start the process, right?
it just got slammed down.
Who was the funder that gave you the residency?
Berkeley Ballet Theater. Berkeley Ballet Theater is an organization I respect enormously because their mission is to have not just good, solid ballet training for a core group of young dancers, but also to involve dancers of other ilks into their organization, expose their students to everything that's out there in the world of dance. So they
I
see
mean,
what,
like for example, dances from other countries. I mean, what do you mean?
well, mostly from people in the Bay Area, but the Bay Area has a very diverse ethnic community. So, uh, they bring in representatives of all different communities, and they want
So
their students
wonderful.
to be aware of everything that's out there that dance encompasses.
So they have given you this opportunity of freedom to explore this new horizon for you, which is, as we said, coming back to your early experimentation at MIT in Boston. So yeah, it's wonderful. I never heard of them. I'm going to look into them. Thank you for sharing, um, and new partners for us, perhaps. Who knows? So, Liss Fain, thank you so much for sharing so much of your this nascent project that's just waiting to be born. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be as fascinating as all of the work that I've seen you do over the years. So, all the best, and hoping for all of us that the pandemic is under control, people get vaccinated, people continue to wear masks, and do whatever each one of us can do to prevent the spread of pandemic coronavirus. Thank you so much, Liz, for being here.
Thank you so much. It's